Hello, tonight, we wander ancient stone streets where togas whisper and warm baths steam in silence. Through bread-scented markets and quiet forums, let us drift into the soul of Rome's forgotten rhythm. Before the sun unfurls its golden script across the terracotta roofs of Rome, before the marble whispers and the olive trees stretch their shadowed limbs, the city dreams. And in that dream, a figure stirs. He is no emperor, no senator draped in purple triumph. He is Civis Romanus, a citizen of the vast and humming republic. His name does not matter here, not yet, for in this rhythm of rising and ritual he is every man, and perhaps every soul who seeks something more in the morning. The wind moves softly across the Aventine, brushing through the linen shutters of a modest domus, where our Roman awakens. Not with urgency, but with intention. The world outside his clay-red walls has yet to roar, but already the city breathes beneath him. There is something sacred in the silence before the forum awakens, like the hush of a temple or the stillness between thoughts. He rises barefoot, the mosaic floor cool beneath him, its patterns echoing the labyrinthine ways of the mind. He washes his face in a bronze basin, not merely to cleanse, but to remember. For the water is drawn from aqueducts that leap across valleys like stony serpents, crafted by the wisdom of those who believed the world could be shaped. Can it? Can order be poured from stone? A soft chime of bells in the distance, the baker's cart rolling toward the Subura. He wraps himself in his tunic, its folds worn with the memory of days gone by, and steps into the hush of a city not yet awake. Rome, even at dawn, is never empty. Figures shuffle in the alleys, vendors arranging fruit, plebeians tending to rooftop pigeons, philosophers murmuring to themselves beneath fig trees. The empire is awake in fragments, and perhaps so is the mind of every man within it. Our citizen walks to the market, not to buy bread alone, but to join the eternal cycle of becoming. Each coin exchanged, each nod to the fishmonger or olive seller, is a thread in the tapestry of identity. Does he know that? Does he sense that the ordinary is holy? He chooses his bread with care, not for its crust or crumb, but because it was baked by a man whose father once marched with Scipio. Legacy is not only in triumph, but in loaves and labor, is it not? There is warmth in his hand, the bread soft and steaming, and for a moment he pauses, looking toward the Palatine Hill, where power dreams beneath golden statues and whispering pines. But his gaze drifts downward, to a beggar seated near the fountain, her eyes half closed in prayer or sleep. He breaks the loaf, wordlessly offering half. Not in pity, but in kinship. For hunger is not always of the body, and charity, perhaps, is the first philosophy. And speaking of philosophy, he turns now toward the edge of the market, where under a cracked colonnade, old men sit cross-legged on woven mats, speaking of stoicism and soul. There is one in particular, a silver-bearded thinker whose words fall like drops of honey into the ears of passers-by. Our citizen listens, not as disciple nor skeptic, but as one who carries a quiet thirst. Virtue, the old man says, is not born in marble halls but carved from within, like a statue hidden in the rough stone of the self. Is transformation not the real alchemy? Our Roman wonders. Is this why he listens? Not to learn, but to remember? The sun now peaks above the tiled skyline, brushing golden fingers across the shoulders of the citizen. His day has not yet begun in fullness, and yet so much has stirred already within him. As he turns to go, back through the echoing steps of the city, past carts and columns and silent shrines, there is a stillness in his breath, as though some unseen door has opened, or perhaps as if it always was. And what is ritual, if not the soul's quiet way of whispering to the divine? The baths await. The toga will soon be drawn. The day will unfold as it always does. But here, in this moment between moments, the Roman walks in silence. And the city listens. And so he walks. Bread shared, words absorbed, silence still trailing behind him like the hem of a dream. The path winds gently from the markets hum toward the lower slopes of the Esquiline Hill, where marble pillars rise like frozen waves in the morning mist. The baths of Titus, vast and humming, await the faithful. Not the faithful of temples or gods, but those devoted to the quiet sacrament of cleansing. For in Rome, the baths are not mere vessels of hygiene, but cathedrals of transformation, where steam and sweat whisper to the soul, and skin is shed like old burdens. He enters beneath the arched vestibule, where mosaics shimmer like sunlit pools, and time seems to loosen its grip. A slave receives his sandals and tunic with a nod, not as servant to master, but as attendant to ritual. Here, every citizen is equal beneath the mist. Beneath the skin, do we not all carry the same clay? Through the apodyterium, the changing hall, he moves, fingers brushing against polished benches worn smooth by 1,000 yesterdays. The air is perfumed faintly with oils, myrrh, olive, a trace of rose, a scent that floats somewhere between memory and longing. Thus the plunge. First, the tepidarium, warm and welcoming, a chamber of breath and time. He sinks into the pool slowly, reverently, as though descending into the mind's own reflection. Steam curls around his temples. His breath deepens. Muscles release what the night had clenched. And here, something shifts. The voices around him are muted murmurs. Debates on grain taxes, whispers of the Senate, gossip of gladiators. They wash over him like distant waves. But his mind drifts inward. Can one truly cleanse without surrender? Is not the shedding of sweat a kind of confession? He moves then to the caldarium, the hot chamber, thick with mist, lit only by shafts of light that cut through high oculi like divine blades. The heat is a silent god, relentless and purifying. He stands still for a moment, feeling the fire beneath his skin. 1,000 pores open like tiny mouths, exhaling doubt, absorbing silence. This is where the day's weight melts, where the soul remembers it is not marble but water, not forged in conquest, but shaped by softness. Is gold not simply lead that has learned to let go? Around him, the forms of other citizens blur, outlines moving through steam like spirits half revealed. A merchant recounts his journey across the Via Appia. A poet hums verses beneath his breath. An old soldier, scarred and silent, scrubs his limbs with volcanic ash. No titles here, no triumphs, only men, only beings, paused in the great theater of existence, standing bare before the mirror of warmth. At last, the frigidarium, the cold plunge, a final breath before return. He steps in with the hesitation of a soul about to be reborn. The chill slices through thought and ego alike. He gasps, and then laughs softly. And maybe that is the point, that after the burn, the shock reminds us we are still alive, still forming, still clay in the hands of something unseen. He emerges from the water not as one who has finished, but one who has begun again. A towel of coarse linen wraps his shoulders, and oil is offered by an attendant with eyes like still water. He nods in thanks. Outside, the sun has climbed higher, painting the streets in amber and shadow. He walks now, toga draped loosely, toward the forum, not with the stride of authority, but with the hush of presence. He is not rushing to speak, but to witness, and perhaps to remember, that within the folds of every ritual, whether of bread, of water, or of robe, there lies the ancient promise. You are not yet finished. You are being shaped still. And maybe the soul is a sculpture slowly emerging from within. He moves now through Rome's pulse, the sacred geometry of arches and columns, where each step echoes not only through stone, but through time. The forum stretches before him like an open scroll, each inscription, each statue, each whispering marble slab a verse in the grand poetry of civilization. And yet, beneath this monument of ambition and law, the ground trembles with questions unspoken. Is power the shape of greatness, or merely its echo? He walks slowly, toga gathered in one hand, passing beneath the temple of Saturn, its tall columns reaching skyward like the outstretched fingers of a pleading god. Pigeons circle above, and the scent of pressed olives lingers in the breeze. Vendors call out with figs, scrolls, bolts of dyed cloth. Scribes sit hunched beside urns of ink, recording debts, decisions, decrees. And in the middle of it all, the rostra, the stone platform from which men cast their words like spears or blessings. Today, a lean orator stands upon it, his arms raised not in fury, but in invitation. A crowd gathers. Some lean on staffs, some cradle dates in rough hands, others nod with eyes half closed. Justice, the orator says, is not a statue nor a sword. It is the mirror we dare to look into. And what do we see, fellow Romans? A city that builds outward, or a people willing to build within? The words ripple. The citizen stops, not to judge or to cheer, but simply to listen, as one might listen to a stream passing over smooth stones. Words, too, can cleanse or cloud. And in that moment he wonders, what if the gold we seek is not in the capital, but in character? Can a republic thrive without inner republics within each soul? He turns from the speaker before the crowd erupts. Not from boredom, but from fullness. Sometimes a single phrase is enough to stir the sediment of the mind. Further down the basilica steps, philosophers gather under the shade of a crumbling arch. They are not aligned in robes of pristine white, but wrapped in earth-toned fabric, some patched, some threadbare. These are not men of appearance, but of essence. He approaches quietly, almost reverently, the way a traveler might approach a well in the desert. One speaks, an older man with a soft jaw and sun-stained eyes. Do not mistake silence for ignorance, he says. The olive tree speaks slowly, but bears fruit for centuries. We are not here to be impressive. We are here to be impressed by truth. Another counters, but what is truth if every man holds a shard and believes it the whole? They chuckle, not with ridicule, but with the joy of shared uncertainty. The citizen sits on a low stone, just listening. Their words do not teach, they unfold. Like petals, like riddles. Life, says another, is a bathhouse. Heated by desire, cooled by indifference, and filled with echoes. But the wise man knows, even in steam, he can still see his reflection. A young voice asks, "Then where is wisdom found?" The old man answers, "Wherever one dares to ask again." And so the sun tilts higher, shadows grow longer, and yet the world within this quiet circle seems to slow. Time itself bows slightly, allowing space for questions older than the empire to rise again, like mist from the stones. Eventually, the citizen stands, nodding to the circle with quiet gratitude. He feels no need to speak. Some truths are exchanged in silence. He returns to the marble path, past bronze statues greened by time, past children chasing a broken hoop with laughter that ignores history. A street musician plays the cithara, notes tumbling like sunlight over still waters. A woman arranges laurel wreaths beside a shrine to Janus, the god of thresholds, of beginnings and ends. And is not every moment a threshold? Are we not always stepping into the unknown, even in routine? He pauses beside a public fountain, water flowing endlessly from a carved lion's mouth, its tongue smoothed by centuries. He cups his hands, drinks, and lets a few droplets fall upon his brow. a blessing, a baptism of sorts. Then onward, for the day has more to offer. And wisdom, like Rome itself, is never found all at once, but piece by piece, breath by breath, beneath pillars and the shadows they cast. The citizen's own toga is simple, clean, but unadorned, a reminder that dignity need not shine to be seen. He approaches the theater of Marcellus, not for spectacle, but for symmetry. Its arches, stacked like rows of thought, pull him inward, as though each stone were a line of verse, carved by time and laughter. Not far beyond, in the open square, a group of youths rehearse a comic play, masks in hand, gestures exaggerated. The citizen stops at a distance. He watches. The masks, fixed expressions of joy, sorrow, rage, conceal the shifting human behind. And yet, somehow, the gesture reveals more than the face. The actor lifts his arms, stumbles, and falls dramatically. The crowd of onlookers laughs. But the citizen, he sees more than humor. He sees allegory. Is life not the same? A stage of stumbling and rising, of roles borrowed and shed, of meaning wrapped in performance? A boy drops his mask. It rolls toward the citizen's feet, the face frozen in painted mirth. He picks it up and hands it back gently, eyes meeting the boy's for a quiet moment. Even laughter, he says softly, can carry wisdom when we know what hides beneath. The boy nods, not fully understanding, but sensing the weight of the words. He moves on, past sculptors chiseling forgotten generals, past a stooped woman chanting to herself beside a shrine, past a beggar with one eye who sings as though he owns the whole city. And always, the citizen listens. To footsteps, to fountains, to whispers curled in corners where sunlight cannot reach. He finds himself before a taberna, a simple tavern carved into the stone, shaded by awnings dyed in ochre and rust. The smell of baked lentils and honeyed wine swirls in the air. Inside, travelers and laborers gather. It is not the Senate, but it holds its own kind of truth. A man speaks of trade lost to pirates near Sicilia. Another curses a stolen goat. A third speaks softly of a lost son, eyes distant, voice tethered to the edge of tears. The citizen sits quietly at the end of the bench, a bowl of figs before him, sipping watered wine. Here, among the ordinary, the divine lingers too. Not in temples or palaces, but in the breath between words, in the clink of shared cups, in the silence that follows sorrow. If every man suffers, then perhaps suffering is not failure, but initiation. And could it be that the soul is not forged in triumph, but in the gentle work of enduring? A breeze lifts the curtain of the taberna's entrance. Dust dances in the light like tiny spirits, and somewhere beyond the voices and shadows, a caged bird sings. He listens. He drinks. And within the ordinary rhythm of the day, he feels it, a sacred pulse. The alchemy of simplicity, the gold of quiet observation. For even the toga, that cloak of duty and illusion, cannot contain the man who chooses to see. Outside the taberna, the air smells of ash and yeast, the kindling breath of ovens tucked into alleyways, where time itself is baked and broken. The citizen turns toward the Pistrina, Rome's humble bakeries, the beating heart of the morning's end. Here, hunger is not a failing. It is ritual, a quiet admission that even those wrapped in togas and philosophy must kneel before the body's need. Smoke curls like prayers from chimney mouths. Ash clings to clay tiles. And in the heat and hiss of morning coals, a truth emerges. Is there anything more sacred than nourishment? Does not the soul crave bread, and also meaning, crumbled side by side? He steps into the warmth. The pistor, arms dusted in flour, hums an old Etruscan tune. Loaves are stacked like golden bricks, shaped by calloused hands, round, scored, crusted. A girl stokes the fire with quiet eyes, her hair braided like the rising spiral of the forum's columns. Coins are exchanged, copper gleaming in a worn palm. The citizen takes a single panis quadratus, still warm, split with the deep marks of the iron mold. He does not eat right away. He holds it, as one might hold a memory still forming. Outside, the market stirs, voices lift like birds startled into flight. Fishmongers chant the tide's fortunes. A man with donkey carts offers olives packed in time. An old woman sells dried rose petals and whispers spells for restful sleep. And beside the fountain, a boy juggles lemons, failing delightfully. The citizen wanders slowly, bread in hand, through this mosaic of commerce. Not above it, but within. For Rome is not merely built of marble and conquest. It is also built of figs and vinegar, of honey cakes, and hard work exchanged with glances. A blind man recites Virgil for a coin. His voice rings with strange clarity, as if memory is a fire that needs only breath to live. Felix capatuit rerum cognoscere causas, he recites. Happy is he who knows the causes of things. The citizen closes his eyes. The words settle like flour on the soul. But what causes hunger beyond the body? Is it absence or longing? Is it emptiness or the space where change begins? He eats, finally, tearing a piece from the warm bread. It steams in the air. The crust sings with time and toil, the inside soft as memory. It is not elaborate, but it is everything. Sustenance, but also communion. A soldier passes by, armor gleaming. A child watches him, half in awe, half in fear. The citizen offers the boy the last of his bread. The child takes it, surprised, and nods solemnly, a silent pact sealed in crumbs. In that moment, the citizen remembers an old tale of a man who climbed Vesuvius to speak with fire, of how he returned, not with gold, but with grain. A truth that the gods do not give gifts, they give hunger, so that we might learn to feed one another. He smiles, and the market continues its slow dance, of giving, of asking, of becoming. Dust rises, feet shuffle, and bells chime faintly from a nearby shrine. Not to Jupiter, not to Mars, but to Ceres, goddess of grain, of nourishment, of the quiet bounty beneath our ambitions. The citizen bows his head as he passes. For beneath the marble, beneath the oration, beneath even philosophy, lies a hunger older than empires. And perhaps it is this hunger that keeps the soul from sleeping too deeply. Perhaps bread is not only for the body, but for the spirit that still believes in warmth. Afternoon bends upon the cobbled bones of the city, and with each passing step, the light folds inward, drawing long shadows beneath the colonnades, where minds walk more than feet, and truth is chased not with swords, but with questions. The citizen, stomach now quiet, turns toward the porticus of Octavia, where the scent of old parchment mingles with laurel and stone. It is not the forum of senators, nor the bustle of buyers. It is softer here, a cradle of thought carved from silence. He moves slowly beneath the marble archways, past statues worn smooth by the thousand eyes of time, past philosophers seated in loose circles, old men with beards like tangled roots, young students with ink on their fingers and futures in their eyes. Here, no one shouts. Words are chosen with care, like stones placed in a riverbed. And each idea, each utterance, is a ripple seeking its reflection. The citizen listens. One elder, eyes like clouded glass, speaks of ataraxia, the peace that comes when desire releases its grip. Another counters, invoking logos, the order behind all chaos, the divine pattern etched in stars and souls alike. They do not argue to win. They argue to remember. What if truth is not a destination, but a direction? And what if every step, even in error, is part of the pilgrimage? A boy nearby scribbles onto wax tablets, his brow furrowed. He looks up suddenly and asks, "Do you think the soul has a shape?" The citizen does not laugh. He kneels beside him. "Maybe not a shape," he says, "but perhaps a motion, like the wind that stirs without being seen." The boy nods. A smile, fleeting as smoke, lifts the edge of his mouth. Behind them, a woman stands reading aloud from Plato, her voice a steady chisel against the wall of unknowing. "Justice is harmony," she intones, "when each part of the soul does its own work." Harmony. The word lingers, and the citizen wonders. If the soul is like a city, with its alleys and colonnades, its temples and gutters, then must it not also have balance? A senate of reason, a market of feeling, a shrine to what we do not yet understand? He walks again, slowly, reverently, through the cloister of thought. On a bench, two men play a quiet game of la trunculi, Roman chess. Their silence is not empty, but ripe. Each move, a metaphor. Each pause, a meditation. And above them, etched into the stone, the shadow of a laurel tree falls, its leaves trembling with the passing wind, as if nature, too, leans in to listen. The citizen takes a seat beneath an arch. He does not speak. He only watches. And in that stillness, something shifts. The city, once noisy and sharp-edged, begins to soften. The bustle becomes breath. The clamor becomes rhythm. And philosophy, no longer locked in scrolls, becomes a current beneath the skin of the world. He closes his eyes. What if wisdom is not something one learns, but something one remembers slowly, like a forgotten dream, or a fire buried deep, waiting only for breath? He breathes, and somewhere within that breath, the soul listens. Evening sighs over the city like a priest's final blessing, and Rome, that eternal amphora of time, tilts gently toward dusk. Light pours golden through its ancient arteries, spilling between marble teeth, washing frescoes in molten amber, and for a brief, trembling hour, the city becomes myth. The citizen rises from the portico, his shadow long now, elongated like thought, like memory, like longing. The steps beneath him are warm, still holding the sun's breath. He walks toward the Templa, where devotion lingers like incense, not always visible but always there. The air smells of myrrh, olive oil, and the distant trace of lightning. Here, time forgets its order. Here, gods wear many faces, some chiseled into pillars, others whispered in dreams. The temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus looms ahead, crowned in gold and storms. But the citizen does not climb those stairs today. He turns instead to a quieter shrine, a modest altar set beside an olive grove, dedicated not to power, but to presence. Vesta, goddess of the hearth, keeper of the sacred flame. The flame still burns, not wild, not boastful, but steady, as if to say, true divinity does not shout. It listens. He kneels beside it, the heat brushing his palms. A young priestess murmurs prayers in rhythmic cadence, her voice like soft rain over coals. And in that soft flicker, the citizen remembers his mother's kitchen, the scent of lentils and rosemary, the warmth of a clay oven on a winter night, the way she sang as she stirred. He realizes, then, this flame is not only for gods. It is for every moment ever loved and never forgotten. It is the spirit of constancy, of care, of tending. Is the sacred not hidden in the tending? In the small, repeated rituals that shape the soul? And are we not, in some way, all priests of the ordinary? A breeze moves through the olive trees, soft, like a secret being passed from leaf to leaf. He rises. In the distance, the tubi sound, long, hollow notes echoing through the hills. A procession nears. Civic officials in white robes, garlanded in laurel, carrying offerings of grain and wine. Not for war, not for spectacle, but simply to say, thank you. The citizen watches as they pass, and wonders, to whom does gratitude truly belong? To the gods? To the earth? To time itself, for letting us live within its breath? He follows them quietly, past the statues and fountains, past children chasing shadows in the last light, past lovers pausing beneath fig trees, their laughter threaded with eternity. And as the sun sinks behind Janiculum Hill, a hush falls over Rome, not silence, but reverence, a great exhale, a golden pause. And in that pause, the citizen feels it, that life, even in its most mundane rhythms, is ceremony, the loaf of bread, the game of chess, the whispered debate beneath the columns, the flames still burning, even when no one is watching. He breathes in the warmth of the hour, and the city glows, as if heaven once walked these streets, and left behind its footprints in stone. Night arrives not as a stranger, but as a familiar guest slipping through the curtains. And Rome, draped now in indigo robes, hushes, like a story nearing its final page. The citizen steps slowly through the dusk-lit streets, where torches sway like fireflies in tall sconces, and the perfume of crushed basil, charcoal, and distant pinewood ovens swirls through the alleys in slow spirals of memory. Shadows are longer now, and the stones beneath his feet cooler, but his pace remains gentle, meditative, as if time were something to walk with, not against. The shops have dimmed. The bakers have folded their aprons. Children's voices have faded into homes where lullabies hum like bees. And from distant balconies, oil lamps flicker, each flame a tiny oracle, whispering, "You made it through another day." And what is a day, really, but a pilgrimage through ritual? A quiet unfolding of the self. Across the scroll of time, he passes a fountain, the water barely audible, dripping with the rhythm of dreams. Above it stands a statue of Mercury, messenger of gods, his marble mouth parted slightly, as if just about to speak. But to whom does the messenger speak when all are sleeping? And what truths come only in silence? The citizen lingers by the fountain, takes a seat on the rim, and looks up. There, above the terracotta roofs and the vines that creep along eaves, the stars begin their slow procession, not hurried, not boastful, but eternal. A lone star first, then another, then a whole constellation, spilling into the Roman sky, like jewels flung from the hands of some ancient, sleeping god. He remembers something a philosopher once said beneath the portico. We are not under the stars. We are of them. And sitting here, in this quiet, flickering moment, he believes it. The constellations, Hercules, Orion, Virgo, they are not only in the sky. They are within the soul. The warrior, the seeker, the nurturer, all roles we carry and shed and carry again. He closes his eyes. What if the night is not the end, but the mirror? What if it shows us not what we've done, but who we've become in doing? Somewhere, a door creaks open. A cat pads softly along a wall. A woman hums a hymn to Luna, goddess of the moon. And the citizen stands again, his limbs soft, his spirit full, not with answers, but with peace. He returns through the vicus, the neighborhood path, past mosaic floors that glitter like little skies, past walls that hold laughter from 1,000 dinners, past doorways worn smooth by 1,000 greetings. At last he reaches home, The oil lamp by the door is still lit, the hearth warm, the table bare now but dignified, like a stage that remembers the play. He washes his hands in a brass basin, unwinds his toga, wraps himself in linen. Outside, the moon has risen fully, a quiet eye watching a world at rest. And as the citizen lies down upon the simple bed, the straw-stuffed mattress sighs beneath him like a tired friend. He does not fear the darkness, for it is not empty. It is full of all that was, and all that might still be dreamt. He whispers a final thought before sleep claims him. May I rise tomorrow not only older, but wiser. And somewhere, beneath the hush of Rome, the sacred fire still burns. Sleep does not come like a storm in Rome. It arrives like an old philosopher, cloaked and unhurried, carrying questions in one hand and silence in the other. And the citizen, now resting beneath a sloped wooden ceiling, lulled by the distant sigh of the Tiber, begins to drift into that other Rome, the Rome of dreams, a city not of marble but of memory, not ruled by senators but by symbols. And in that ether, where the boundaries of body soften, and thought itself becomes architecture, he walks once more. But now, the streets shift and shimmer like gold leaf on water. He stands in a forum not built by stone, but by longing. Statues here are not carved from travertine. They are formed of emotion, of forgotten laughter and quiet sorrow. Each column a recollection, each temple a truth once glimpsed, then lost. And there, just beyond the basilica of thought, he sees a figure, an old man with a scroll tucked beneath his arm, and eyes like the deep wells beneath the Palatine. Have you come to ask or to remember? The figure says, his voice made of sand and wind. The citizen cannot answer, because in dreams, the mouth is no longer the vessel of truth. The heart speaks instead. The old man gestures toward a garden where fig trees grow from amphory, and ivy coils into the shape of sacred words. Together, they walk. What is a day but a dream we repeat? What is ritual but the mind's way of speaking to the soul? They stop beneath a myrtle tree, where bees hum a low chant, the sound ancient and tender, as if time itself were remembering. The old man lifts his scroll, unfurls it with fingers like cracked wax. There are no letters, only gold, delicate veins of it, tracing shapes, spirals, labyrinths, and the faint outline of a face. This, he says, is your day as seen by the gods. The citizen stares, the gold shimmering like starlight on dew. He sees moments, a shared loaf of bread with a beggar, the sound of a child's laughter as he passed, a word left unsaid to spare someone's pride, a glance held one heartbeat longer than usual. Each small act, now illuminated, revealed not as fleeting but eternal. What if the divine hides not in grandeur but in gentleness? What if each kindness is a coin in the treasury of the soul? The old man rolls the scroll and smiles. Transformation, he whispers, is not thunder, but attention. And with that he fades, as all wise things do. The citizen turns, and the dream dissolves, not abruptly, but like mist in morning sun. The bed stirs beneath him. A rooster crows in the distance. Light peeks like a curious child beneath the shutters. Dawn has returned. The city is waking, and so, too, does he. But something is different now. He does not rise simply to begin another day. He rises to continue a sacred cycle, woven in breath, gesture, and golden silence. And though he does not speak of the dream, its warmth lingers in his chest, like the last ember of a fire still waiting to become flame again. Morning again, but not the same morning. This one arrives with softer hands, as though the dream has followed the citizen across the veil of sleep, slipping beneath the folds of his linen robe. and into the quiet chambers of his chest. He moves slowly, not from weariness, but from reverence, for he now understands, even the act of standing, even the breath drawn before lacing a sandal, is a ceremony of existence. He steps into the sunlight, which drapes across his shoulders like a warm benediction. Outside, Rome is stretching, not with noise, but with presence. The stones glisten faintly with morning dew, as though the city itself has wept in secret, and now stands refreshed. The citizen walks toward the bread market, not out of hunger alone, but because this too is sacred. The gathering, the choosing, the exchange of coin and glance and warmth. He passes a potter, already spinning clay into elegant vessels, his wheel humming like a prayer. He sees a child with figs in her satchel, humming a song she doesn't yet understand, but somehow remembers. And the air smells of flour, of yeast, of fire, the ancient triad of transformation. At the market's edge, beneath a canopy of flax and faded dye, loaves of bread sit in tidy rows, each one a quiet triumph of patience and flame. He picks a round loaf, still warm, its crust golden and cracked like desert soil. He breaks it in half, and the steam sighs upward, a ghost of wheat fields and wind and women's hands, kneading stories into dough. Eats slowly, leaning against a sunlit wall, and in the pause between bites, he feels the rhythm of the city, the shuffle of sandals on stone, the muted bell of a donkey's harness, the call of a seller offering olives like black pearls in a basin, the laughter of a baker shouting, "My bread is still hotter than the forum." And under it all, the low thrum of earth's breathing. Can a city breathe? And if it does, is it not through us? Are we not the lungs of our time, inhaling ritual, exhaling memory? The citizen closes his eyes briefly, chewing the last piece of bread, as though it were the final word of a poem. And then, a gentle rumble. The earth? His own belly, asking for a sip of water or a cup of wine. He chuckles to himself, for even in this stillness, the body remains a student of desire. He heads now toward a shaded portico, where a small fountain trickles over moss-covered marble, fed by aqueducts drawn from distant mountains, as if the gods had pressed their fingers into the landscape to pull water toward the hearts of men. He cups his hands beneath the stream and drinks. It tastes of stone and sky, of gravity and generosity. And as it slides down his throat, he wonders, what nourishes us more, the bread we eat, or the intention behind it, the water we drink, or the journey it takes to reach us? And then, as he wipes his hands dry upon his robe, he hears the sound of a lyre nearby, plucked slowly, tentatively, like a thought forming in the mind of a god. Fearns. A philosopher is seated beneath an olive tree, fingers on strings, eyes on the horizon. The citizen approaches, not to speak, but to listen, and in the stillness between notes, another truth begins to rise, like the scent of time in sun-warmed air. The lyre weeps gently, its notes drifting upward like incense, not toward the gods above, but toward the deeper sky within. And the philosopher does not strum to be heard. He strums to remember. He does not gaze upon the horizon to predict the weather, but to measure the soul's vastness against the curve of the world. The citizen stands near, quiet as a stone warmed by the sun. No words pass between them, not yet. Only the shared breath of two men, listening to time. And then, with the slow rustle of a fig leaf, the philosopher speaks. "You ate bread this morning, yes?" The citizen nods. "Then tell me," he plucks a low chord, "was it hunger that moved you, or the memory of being fed as a child?" The question falls like a pebble into a deep pool. The citizen smiles faintly, unsure. He had not thought of it, but now he remembers his mother's hands dusted in flour, her quiet hum as dough rose beside the hearth. Perhaps it was not hunger alone, but longing. Do you know why I ask? The philosopher continues, resting his hand gently upon the wood of his lyre. Because every act is both a doing and a remembering. Every movement forward is a return. He leans back against the tree, his robe pooling like water around him. I have played this song before, under different trees, in different cities, wearing different names. The citizen sits beside him, his body easing into the shade, as though it too remembers this ritual. Philosophy, the old man murmurs, is not the art of answering questions. It is the craft of holding them until they ripen. Above them olives sway, small, green, and full of sun. And here is one I've been holding lately, he whispers, his eyes closing as though to better see. If the world feeds us in cycles, sun, grain, fruit, sleep, then what is the soul's harvest? What grows when we let ourselves be still? The citizen breathes slowly, watching the shadows of leaves, paint shifting mosaics on the marble tiles beneath their feet. For a moment, he sees not a man beside him, but a grove of ancient minds, Plato, Epictetus, Heraclitus, not separate, but echoes in a single tree, roots entangled in time. The lyre hums again. You have walked the market, the philosopher says softly. You have bathed and clothed and broken bread. But tell me, have you witnessed your day? Or have you merely worn it like a borrowed toga? The citizen does not answer aloud. 4 answers seem small here. Instead, he picks up a fallen olive, rolls it between his fingers. It is smooth, imperfect, and he wonders, is this what life is? A fruit formed slowly from shadow and sun? A ripening of silence into taste? A patience that becomes presence? The philosopher stands, dusting the hem of his robe. I leave you now, he says, not like a farewell, but like the closing of a gate long left ajar. Go on, but do not chase time. Let it approach you. It always does. And then he disappears into the alleyway, his lyre quiet, his scent faintly of myrrh and thought. The citizen remains beneath the olive tree, a single man in a city of millions. But something inside him has changed, not dramatically, but subtly, like soil after the first rain. The wind shifted gently, as if it too had paused to listen to the olive tree's last whisper. It brushed the citizen's cheek like a knowing hand, cool and scented with thyme and baked stone. He rose slowly from where he sat, as though standing was no longer a reflex, but a decision. The streets of Rome stretched out before him, woven like a tapestry of lives and gestures, each thread trembling with unseen meaning. How many walk these same stones and never look down? How many wear the day like armor, never knowing it was meant to be a garment? He stepped forward, and the world moved with him, not in grandeur, not in triumph, but in rhythm, the soft orchestration of a city breathing with intention. Passing the cloth vendors near the Via Tecta, he paused. A woman stood behind a stall draped in fine linens. Some dyed the hue of early peaches, others left pure as cloudlight. She was older, her hair bound in coils like vines around a vineyard gate, and her hands, oh, her hands, they were full of stories. She looked at the citizen and said nothing, but her eyes, they offered him the question, what do you wrap yourself in when no one watches? He glanced down at his toga, simple and cream-colored, creased from the morning's movement, respectable, unremarkable, expected, and for a moment, he imagined wearing not cloth, but memory, a tunic stitched from laughter, A mantle woven with regret, a belt braided from choices made in shadows. Do we not all wear our pasts? Some in silence, some in silk. He reached out to touch a bolt of fabric, smooth and cool beneath his fingers. It shimmered faintly in the sun, like moonlight trapped in thread. The woman nodded slowly. "This one breathes," she said at last, her voice low, weathered, certain. "It will remind your skin that it, too, is alive." He smiled faintly, not because he needed new garments, but because he recognized a deeper truth. In her quiet offering, to wrap oneself in something living, was that not the essence of the soul's yearning? He did not buy the cloth, but he bowed his head in gratitude, and she returned the gesture, as though acknowledging a shared knowing between strangers. Moving on, he wandered now without haste, letting the city guide his steps, past marble fountains shaped like sea beasts, past poets leaning against columns with ink-stained fingers, past children pretending to be senators and gladiators, in the theater of street corners. Each passerby, a verse in the city's endless hymn, and within him, quiet question rose, soft as twilight mist. What does it mean to be dressed in presence? To wear one's soul on the outside, not hidden behind folds of custom? He turned into a side street, narrow and cool. The walls here were ancient, their bricks dark with time, moss creeping through cracks like forgotten thoughts resurfacing. A cat leapt from his sill, its fur black, its eyes gold as aureus coins. It landed without sound, then vanished through a door left ajar. The citizen followed, not from curiosity, but from something older. A tug at the edge of awareness, a scent of meaning unspoken. Inside was a textile shop, but it was unlike the others. No bright dyes, no chatter, only quiet, and a long row of looms, whispering like breath in sleep. A man worked the nearest loom. His skin was pale, his back hunched, his hands moved not with speed, but with devotion. He looked up once, met the citizen's gaze, and said, "We weave not to clothe, but to remember," then returned to his task. The citizen lingered only a moment, long enough to see the threads beneath the loom, red, white, gold, indigo, and to feel that some part of his own story had just been added to the pattern. He left without words. Back on the street, Rome shimmered once more, not as a city, but as a robe of many textures, draped over the shoulders of time itself. The warmth of the cobbled road curled up through his sandals, like an ember humming beneath the skin, as if the city itself had memory, not just of wars and triumphs, but of bread. The bread. There is something sacred in its making, not just in the flour sifted like fine dust from forgotten gods, nor in the water drawn like tears from the belly of stone cisterns, but in the silence of kneading, that rhythmic, meditative pressing, like a mother shaping the world with her palms. The citizen turns now, drawn by scent more ancient than any decree. A winding path leads to the Pistrinum, Rome's humble bakeries, where the sacred alchemy of fire and flour never ceases. Here the morning smoke still lingers, sweet with barley and ash, drifting through wooden shutters as offerings, to the ever-hungry sky. And there, behind stone counters pocked with age, stand the bakers. They are not like philosophers, nor senators, nor priests, yet perhaps they are the most holy of all. For what is more sacred than giving warmth to another's hunger? A young boy with soot-smeared cheeks turns the great rotary mill, its creaking groan like a chant whispered by an old god. Stone against stone, grain ground into dust, life into meal, hope into nourishment. Behind him, fire sings low in the domed oven, a soft, endless hum, like a lullaby inside the belly of earth. And the citizen watches as the flat round loaves emerge, scored with lines like sunbursts, like wheels, like the echo of something eternal. One baker, an elder with white ash in his hair, hands him a loaf without a word. Not a transaction, a ritual. The bread is warm, not hot, but alive. He holds it in both hands, and for a moment, he does not bite. He only feels. What is this simple shape that calms the soul? Why does the body remember it as something holy? Is it merely grain, or grief pressed into nourishment, or the silence of all who have knelt before ovens in sorrow and in hope? He breaks the loaf slowly, and the steam rises, not as mist, but as memory, heats. And with every bite, he is reminded that transformation need not be grand. It can be soft, simple, daily. He eats beneath an archway, where ivy braids itself into the brick, where time rests its weary head in the shadows. A mother passes with a child strapped to her hip. She smiles briefly, nodding as if to say, "I know. I, too, have tasted this piece." The citizen nods in return, crumbs clinging to his fingertips, like stardust, and in that moment, the bread becomes more than sustenance. It becomes remembrance. Remembrance of the soil, of calloused hands, of fire, of patience, and of that deeper hunger, the one no bread can fill, the hunger to belong, to be folded into the fabric of the day, gently, like dough, to be warmed, and to warm another in return. He rises once more, the crust tucked into his satchel, and the last crumbs upon his lips, like the closing lines of a sacred psalm. With bread still warm in his satchel, he drifted deeper into the city's breath, where the stones no longer simply paved the way, but began to whisper, not in words, not in language shaped by mouth or scroll, but in a knowing, an ancient thrum beneath the soles, as if the road itself remembered, every step ever taken. Can silence be a scripture? Can stone carry the soul's echo? The citizen's path led him now toward the Forum Romanum, not with purpose, but with pull. It rose before him like a valley of wisdom turned to ruin, and so still it pulsed with a hush that felt louder than all the Senate's cries. Marble columns reached skyward, some broken, some whole, like the fingers of philosophers, still trying to ask one last question. Birds made nests in the crooks of fallen capitals. Sunlight poured like golden ink across carved Latin, worn now by centuries of wind and weather, until the letters became ghosts. He stepped gently, not for fear of stumbling, but for reverence. To walk here was to walk among ideas. Ideas forged in fire, ideas that failed, ideas that still hovered, like breath on cold stone. A group of orators stood in a loose circle near the temple of Saturn. They spoke not with firebrand rage, but with measured grace, as if each word were an offering to the gods of reason. Justice is not what we declare, one said, but what we choose when no eyes are watching. The citizen lingered near the edge of their circle, not interrupting, only absorbing. His mind, like parchment, caught flame from their quiet eloquence. Beyond them stood the arch of Septimius Severus, its triumphs etched in deep relief, men carved in battle, horses mid-charge, victory frozen in limestone. But now, time had softened their faces. Moss crept into their eyes. Even conquest dissolves in the rain. What becomes of glory when the crowds have gone? Is a crown still golden if it is worn in solitude? He moved on, passing the Senate House, Curia Julia, its heavy doors closed, yet humming with memory. Here, arguments once thundered, like storms between mountains. Here, ambition was both born and betrayed. Here, the citizens' ancestors may have stood, back straight, words trembling, carrying not just speeches, but hopes. Now there was only stillness, not lifelessness, but a deeper kind of life, the kind that speaks only in pauses. A boy ran past, chasing a hoop with a stick, his laughter skipping across the forum, like water over stones. The citizen watched him and smiled, for even amid the weight of marble thought, joy found a way in. And isn't that the true measure of civilization? Not the grandeur of temples, but the echo of children's play. Amid their fallen shadows? He turned toward the rostra, once the stage of Cicero, where ships' prows lined the speaker's platform, as symbols of naval victory. Now pigeons nested there. He stood at its base and looked up, imagining the crowd, the eyes, the silence before a speech began, the inhale before the first word. He whispered, "What is truth, if not the courage to speak it when your voice shakes?" No one heard, but the stones, they listened. They always did. He moved on, his steps slower, as if the ground had grown sacred beneath his feet. Not because of what had been built here, but because of what remained. Not statues or columns, but questions. Questions older than empires. What is the measure of a man? Is it his house, his title, his legacy? Or is it the kindness of his voice, the warmth in his walk, the gentleness with which he greets the wind? He paused one last time at the edge of the forum, turned to take it all in. The broken beauty, the stories asleep in stone, the weightless hush of eternity. Then he whispered, almost inaudibly, "Thank you." And the wind replied, with silence, so full, it could have been music. By now the sun had tilted westward, its light softened to amber, as if the heavens themselves had dipped a brush into warm oil and painted the world with reverence. The citizen passed beneath a row of cypress trees, tall and still like ancient sentinels, watching the rhythm of Roman life unfold below them. And it was here, in this quiet stretch between the Forum and the Subura, that he paused by a shaded fountain, to don his toga once more. The fabric unfolded like a scroll, white, heavy, deliberate. Each movement, a choreography of belonging. A Roman citizen did not wear the toga for comfort. It was not a garment of ease, but of honor, a visible reminder that freedom, too, carried its weight. He laid it over his left shoulder, draping it across his arm with care, like wrapping oneself in philosophy, in memory, in the law itself. What is it to wear a nation? To wrap oneself not only in cloth, but in myth? The toga was silence made visible. Its folds whispered of Senate chambers and funerals, of oaths sworn in marble halls, of the blood of kings, and the ink of scholars. Nearby, a young man struggled with his own toga, fumbling the fabric, its corners slipping like rebellious thoughts. The citizen stepped toward him, offering no words, only gestures. One hand on the shoulder, one fold corrected, a nod. And in that moment, the toga became not just garment, but inheritance, passed from one spirit to another, with nothing more than presence. For this was Rome too, not just war or marble, but the gentle correction of a stranger, the silent legacy that breathes through fabric. He walked on, the toga now hugging him like the weight of dusk. Its hem brushed the ground like a priest's robe, as if blessing the stones with every step. Above, the rooftops of the city glowed, terracotta kissed by sun, smoke curling like prayers from chimney mouths, the day exhaling. Vendors folded up their awnings. Philosophers closed their scrolls. Children were called in by mothers' voices that floated across alleyways like lullabies. And as he moved through the narrowing streets, the citizen felt not grand, but grounded. The toga didn't elevate him, it returned him, to what mattered, not status, but stillness, not command, but continuity. He remembered the words of a Stoic he had once heard. At the steps of the Temple of Concord, the outer garment is a mirror to the inner order. Wear it not to be seen, but to see yourself. So he did. He wore his toga not for others' gaze, but to feel his soul folded into form, to carry dignity like a hush over the chaos of the world. The cloak did not shield him from the wind, but from forgetting, reminded him gently, you are Roman, not by conquest, not by name, but by how you walk through the day, how you carry the silence, how you give weight to things unseen. He reached the edge of the Subura, where rich and poor, noble and laborer, philosopher and butcher, all met beneath the same turning stars. And in that twilight mingling, he found no division, only shared breath, only the soft, unseen thread that connects all beings who live in rhythm, with the sun and the soil. As twilight unfurled its indigo wings, the citizens stepped into the Subura, where the city's heartbeat grew closer to the earth, not weaker, but more human, more honest. Here, the marble faded, but the spirit deepened. The streets narrowed, curling like vines around humble dwellings, where ivy crept between bricks, and oil lamps flickered behind shutters. Like small suns in clay cages, children ran barefoot through puddles, laughing, barefoot philosophers of joy, and an old woman watered basil in a cracked amphora, humming a hymn older than empire. And though this place lacked the grandeur of the Palatine, it was rich with something rarer, the immediacy of breath, the intimacy of living, not to be remembered, but to remember. What if greatness was not in being seen, but in seeing? What if the unseen mattered more? He passed a bread stall now closed for the night, and a dog, curled beside it, twitched in dream. He passed two men in faded tunics, debating beside a brazier, the coals glowing red like secret stars. Is the soul born with virtue, or must it earn it? Chewing a fig slowly as if it were a thought. Both, said the other, like fire needing both wood and spark. The citizen did not intrude. He only listened, for here in the Subura, the philosophers had no marble steps, but their minds towered all the same. Down an alley where laundry hung like tired flags, he heard music, a cithara being plucked gently by a man in the doorway. The notes were slow, tender, as though the strings knew sorrow, and had made peace with it. He passed a wall where children had drawn ships in charcoal, their sails crooked, their waves wild, and yet more true than any statue could be. Reminded him that imagination is the first city we ever build, and perhaps the only one we never lose. As he wandered deeper, the Subura opened into a small courtyard. A single fig tree stood in its center, gnarled and gentle, like an elder priest of the wild. Beneath it sat a woman grinding herbs, her hands dyed green and gold, her eyes fixed not on her work, but on something behind her lids. Memory, perhaps, or something older. The citizen bowed his head slightly as he passed, for he felt somehow that she was older than Rome, that her silence knew the songs. Before Latin had a name, he found a bench worn smooth by generations, and sat down beneath a lantern's flame, watching it flicker with the breath of the wind. Nearby, a cat perched on a windowsill, its gaze endless, its stillness more profound than 1,000 scrolls. And in that quiet moment, the citizen realized he was not in a city, he was in a soul. Rome was not marble, it was this breathing rhythm of imperfection, this mosaic of human scent and skin and striving. What if the empire was not out there, but within, What if the city we build outside only echoes the one inside us, waiting to be seen? He closed his eyes and listened to the cithra, the wind, the quiet arguments, the fig tree's slow stretch toward starlight. And in that breath of stillness, he remembered, the body is not just flesh. It is forum, it is temple, it is street corner and philosophy, a city of echoes, waiting to be heard. The light had turned blue now, a velvet hush descending across the Subura, folding the city into itself like parchment closing after thought. The citizen rose from the bench, with the slow care of one carrying something sacred, not in his hands, but in his being. And so he made his way east, toward the old library that stood at the edge of the Aventine, a modest one, not gilded in gold nor guarded by senators, but one where the breath of wisdom still lingered in the mortar. The path wound gently uphill, past the shadowed columns of sleeping shrines, past doorways now lit only by memory, past birds tucking their wings beneath tile roofs, as if turning pages of a night unwritten. Inside the library, dust danced in the air like forgotten prayers, spiraling softly in the lamplight, as though time itself were exhaling. Shelves stood like sentinels, row upon row of wooden silence, each scroll a soul, each line a trail through some long-lost interior world. He did not come here to read. Not tonight. He came to remember. A librarian nodded at him quietly, a man with eyes like still water, and hands ink-stained with time. The citizen walked past scrolls of Cicero, of Lucretius, of the dreamers and doubters, who had once questioned the sky, and the self in the same breath. He paused before a shelf where a single scroll had been left open, its Latin script curved like reeds in wind, its edges frayed, as though it had been read by firelight too many nights to count. And there he stood, still, silent, reading not with the eyes, but with presence. The words were simple. The soul is not a place. It is a passage. All who walk it are scholars, though not all know it. He exhaled slowly, the air cool and scented with parchment. And in that moment, he realized, Rome had built aqueducts for water, amphitheaters for spectacle, temples for gods, but the soul's architecture was far more hidden. Its walls were made of wonder. Its streets were formed in reflection. Its currency was thought. Can silence be a kind of empire? Can a scroll contain more glory than a general's parade? He turned and looked around the library, and it no longer seemed like a building, but a vessel, a ship of minds, sailing not on seas, but across centuries. The citizen placed a hand gently on the spine of one scroll, as if to thank it for surviving the weather of time. He imagined the scribe who wrote it, perhaps barefoot, perhaps weary, but guided by something deeper than ambition. He imagined a future reader, unknown, unborn, running fingers across the same letters. And he smiled, because in that invisible thread, scribe to citizen to dreamer unborn, was a kind of Rome no sword could touch. He left the library without taking anything, yet carrying more than when he arrived. Outside, the night had grown deeper, the sky now a bowl of obsidian, with stars scattered like thoughts unspoken. The moon hung low, an ivory coin tossed into the fountain of the sky. And as the citizen walked homeward, he did not feel alone. Not here. Not in this city of breath and scrolls and shared echoes. He felt accompanied by all who had walked before, and all who would one day walk again. Night whispered now like an old friend, not the night of fear, nor of darkness unnamed, but a night of knowing, of folding inward, of lighting lamps in the caverns of thought. The citizen walked slowly, his sandals quiet against the cobbled path, where moonlight pooled like spilled silver. Above him, the sky arched vast and infinite, its constellations silent scripts, etched by fingers unseen. He passed an apothecary, its doors still ajar, where herbs hung like sacred garlands, their scent bitter, earthy, wise. Behind the counter sat a woman with streaks of white in her hair, grinding myrrh and whispering to herself. He did not enter. He only paused at the threshold, and she, sensing his stillness, said softly, without lifting her eyes, "Even the gods have wounds." Then returned to her mortar. What if healing was not the closing of wounds, but the reverence of them? What if scars were not reminders of weakness, but of having lived? The citizen moved on, his thoughts now trailing behind him like incense smoke, diffuse, sacred, unanswered. He returned to his domus, its gate quiet, the household stilled. A single flame burned in a bronze lamp by the threshold, left by a servant who believed, perhaps, that night itself could be welcomed like a guest. He stepped inside, removed his sandals with a breath of relief, and passed beneath the frescoed arch that told tales of nymphs and seasons and time's gentle theft. The air was cool, stone walls now warmed only by memory, and somewhere deeper in the house, a dog exhaled in sleep. The citizen entered his study, a small, candlelit chamber where scrolls lay like sleeping thoughts, and a single stool waited like a companion in silence. He sat, not to read, not to write, but to be, to feel the weight of the day soften, to let its colors dissolve into the ink of dusk, to let go. And there, with eyes half closed, he began a ritual as old as the breath itself. The listening, the entering, the descent. He imagined the breath as a river, one that flowed not through lungs alone, but through the halls of the spirit. And with each inhale, he walked deeper into himself, past colonnades of memory, past atriums of forgotten wonder, into the sanctuary, where no empire could follow. Can a man conquer the world if he does not know the kingdom beneath his ribs? And if the body is a temple, who then is its priest? Time dissolved. Outside, the moon drifted past rooftops, watching the city's dreams, as if guarding them. Inside, the citizens saw not the ceiling, but stars, not plaster, but sky. And as the candle trembled beside him, he realized there were lanterns within, lamps beneath the skin, small flames fed by breath and thought and longing. And perhaps that was Rome too. Not the Rome of stone and law, but the Rome of spirit, endless, intimate, unseen. He stayed there, breathing, not seeking answers, but steeping in the quiet, where questions rest like seeds. When he rose again, it was not because sleep had come, but because something within him had settled, like sediment in still water, like windless flame. The candle now burned low, its wax coiled around the base like a white serpent at rest. He watched it, and in its soft flicker saw something strange, a kind of mirrored reflection of his own being, unmoving yet alive, silent yet speaking. Is the soul more like fire than flesh? Does it not hunger to rise, yet accept the stillness of its place? He walked softly now, barefoot across cold mosaic tiles, down a passage that opened into his private garden, a space not of ornament, but of peace. No fountains gurgled here, no sculptures stood with immortal poise, only vines winding gently along stone walls, olive trees with gnarled limbs like old philosophers, and a scattering of night flowers that bloomed only when no one was watching. It was here, always here, that the citizen came to remember the world behind the world. Above him, the stars continued their silent procession, those ancient companions whose names he'd been taught as a boy. Pine the hunter, Venus the wanderer, Saturn the devourer of time. And in this garden, where time seemed to loosen its hold, he felt the strange blending of all he had been and all he would become. He knelt beside a patch of rosemary, pressed his fingers into the soil, and breathed in the scent, sharp, ancient, healing. And then came the thought, a quiet voice, not his own. You plant not for today. You plant for the unseen, for the hands that will one day touch what you buried. His eyes softened. Could it be that Rome itself was a garden? A great and trembling thing, planted not for conquest, but for continuity? He gazed up at the olive tree above him, its branches twisted by storms it had long since survived, and marveled. No marble monument had known such time. No law had lasted as long as a single tree's silent patience. He leaned against its trunk, feeling bark against skin, and let himself sink into the quiet rhythm of all things eternal. Here, the breath deepened, not as command, but as communion. Here the pulse slowed, not from fatigue, but from reverence. And in this stillness, he remembered the words of a teacher long ago. There is a world beneath the world, and only those who listen can live in both. He remained there for what might have been an hour, or perhaps a moment that refused to be measured. Time in this garden did not tick. It bloomed, and as he rose again, the stars overhead seemed nearer, as if they too had leaned in to listen. He walked slowly back inside, leaving the garden untroubled, like a prayer whispered into wind. And somewhere deep inside him, a seed had been planted, not of ambition, but of understanding, that the daily rhythm, so often dismissed as mundane, was in truth a ritual of the sacred. Every step, every breath, every silence, all of it was the temple. Dawn did not break. It exhaled like a sigh from the lungs of the earth itself, softening the hard lines of rooftops, and gilding the city's silence in amber hush. The citizens stirred not with urgency, but with reverence, as if awakening were not the end of sleep, but the beginning of worship. Outside his window, the world yawned in golden tones. Vendors stretched beneath canvas canopies, dust lifted in lazy spirals, and pigeons cooed like monks, chanting in the narthex of morning. He rose, wrapping his toga with slow grace, not as a garment, but as a veil, a soft return to his role in the living play. That was the day. The fabric, once white, now bore the stains of time. The faint press of days lived fully. Yet this too was sacred. Can cloth remember? Can even thread be anointed by routine? He stepped out again, not into noise, but into rhythm. Each street corner a verse, each breath an invocation. And as he walked, passing familiar faces whose names he may never know, he began to understand. This city was not merely built. It was prayed into being. Each brick laid by a hand with hope. Each aqueduct drawn like a hymn across the earth. Each grain of flour at the market, a silent sacrifice for daily grace. At the corner, an old man carved laurel leaves into a lintel. Chips of stone fell like pale snow. But his face was serene, not because the work was small, but because it was part of the whole. Nearby, a young girl fed doves with leftover crumbs, and her laughter rose like temple bells. The citizen paused, and in that ordinary street, bustling, dusty, fragrant with roasted figs and old leather, he saw it. The temple was not in marble columns, nor in echoing basilicas. It was here, in the dust, in the grind, in the mundane, and perhaps even the gods, those tireless beings of lore, found their rest not in Olympus, but in the small offerings of a Roman morning, the crust of bread shared, the word of kindness passed, The pause before action, the silence after thought. Was this not the truest liturgy? He turned down an alley fragrant with laurel and bay, where a widow swept her doorstep, humming a lullaby for no one to hear. He nodded. She smiled. Nothing more passed, yet everything did. He thought of the garden again, of the olive tree, of the soil beneath his nails, of the stars above his skull. What if heaven was not elsewhere? What if the sacred had always been wrapped in the skin of the ordinary? As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows of columns and lives, the citizen felt it, not pride, not grandeur, but the quiet humility of belonging to this city, to this moment, to this life. He continued walking, past bakeries opening shutters, past children arguing over olives, past scholars in quiet debate beneath sycamores. And in his chest, a stillness lingered, not the stillness of absence, but of presence. He had walked many roads, through politics and pleasure, through hunger and wealth, through loneliness and laughter. But today, he walked the oldest path of all, the path of now, the path of dust and light, the path of the soul returning to itself, through the gateway of a common day. He continued walking, past bakeries opening shutters, past children arguing over olives, past scholars in quiet debate beneath sycamores. And in his chest, a stillness lingered, not the stillness of absence, but of presence. He had walked many roads, through politics and pleasure, through hunger and wealth, through loneliness and laughter. But today, he walked the oldest path of all, the path of now, the path of dust and light, the path of the soul returning to itself, through the gateway of a common day. And as he passed beneath a fig tree, its leaves whispering like soft prayers, he remembered something he had once forgotten. The city was not made of stone. It was made of moments, of gestures, a breath. The gold Rome sought through conquest had never been in the vaults. It was here, in the silence of a widow's broom, in the laughter of a child, in the olive tree that did not hurry, in the bread that rose before the sun. The temple was never out there. It was always, quietly, within. So he walked on, not toward glory, but toward the morning. And maybe, just maybe, the journey was the transformation all along. Thank you for walking the sacred streets with me.